super duper entertaining. Alright, looks like we're ready. I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe it's the lack of sleep. Alright. So, yeah. This process is not as bad as it seems. So last night, I thought it would be a good idea to print a Battletech building, and got momentarily distracted, and that distraction resulted in me screwing down one side of the FEP plate but not the other, and that means that as the print plate was set down into the resin and then hardened on the screen and then lifted up, it also lifted half the tank, which of course not only resulted in the failure of the print, but also led to a bunch of resin being spilled because I had just refilled the tank. And so when it lifted, it's like this. When it lifted up the tank, a bunch of the resin spilled out of the side. So that's why that happened. So entirely user error. It's not anyone's responsibility but mine for that little mess up. So part of the consequence for that was a bunch of resin everywhere, which was no fun to clean up, and a small hole in the middle of the FEP screen from where a piece of the 3D printed building was smashed down into the plastic and pushed through. So now the tank leaks and this little plastic sheet needs to be replaced, or else I can't print anymore. So that's what I'm going to do now. And then I jokingly said that I was going to do it on stream, and then here we are now. So we'll see how it goes. So starting with the 4 screws on the outside, and it is deceptively easy because they've kind of done a good job of idiot-proofing this process. They give you 3 different size Allen wrenches, and you're going to work your way down through the sizes. So the 4 at the corners are the largest of the wrenches. So you're going to do these 4 first, and then you move on to the next size down. These over here. And work your way down. You can see here from all the hardened resin. The reason why I didn't do this last night is I had to set it down into, I have a UV light that I sat in front of this and let it just cook all the resin that had leaked into all the little nooks and crannies due to the incident. So it's all hardened, and you can work with it without having to wear gloves because it's all hardened. So good times. So valuable lesson. And it's usually not a problem. It's happened to me twice, and each time for a different reason. So it's not like I'm not learning my lesson. It's that the procedures I have set up to make sure I don't forget things like this were interrupted. And so I just have to make sure limit those interruptions as much as possible, and we'll have much happier times ahead with printing. It's a skill like anything else. You practice it and make the mistakes and learn from them, and then can't shy away from making mistakes as long as you learn from them and don't make the same one again. And this one is technically, it's the same mistake because I didn't screw down both sides, but for a slightly different reason. So I learned a slightly different lesson. At least that's what I'm telling myself. These screws, when you put them in, are what puts the tension on the plastic. So that's why there's so many. I will end up washing my hands when I'm done, even just in case there is a little bit of extra spare resin that wasn't quite hardened because it was hidden by the edge of the screw or something. But it's probably not lethal, and this process would be a lot more difficult if I was wearing gloves. So I'm not. Alright, that's in there pretty tight. Let's turn it this way. Yeah, that was hardened in there with resin. It's quite a mess. Quite the mess. Come on, come out. So it's just lots of loosening screws, taking this sheet out, and then replacing the screws with the new FEP in between. And it doesn't really matter how you take the screws out, but when I do put in the new screen, you have to keep the constant tension. So when you tighten the screws, you kind of go one side and hop to the other, and we'll kind of do that process here in a bit. Can't be averse to using screws if you buy a 3D printer. Just goes with the territory. Come on. You're out, come out. The reason why it's sticking is it's hitting the plastic and doesn't want to come out. Get creative here. There we go. Pulling them through the plastic that they originally punched through. They don't want to come out. Not altogether an unpleasant activity. It's just not like you have to do a whole lot of thinking when you're removing screws. Alright, so now that those are out, let's see if this will pop out with all the resin that's dried on the inside. Clearly see where the resin soaked in there, and it's quite hard at the moment. Normally not this difficult, but the resin has dried inside, and alright, so there's some liquid resin in here, so I'm actually going to have to stop and put gloves on and clean this. Because you do not want resin on your fingers. Going to be a little bit messier than usual because of the resin here. It's in here. So I've got a bottle of IPA. just wipe this down. Again, not normally an issue. If you were just replacing your FEP for a hole that was not leaking as much as mine leaked because of the other things that occurred, you wouldn't have to worry about this because the resin would be not in the internals like it is here. Spraying it with the IPA. I'm not going to be able to finish this in stream because I'm going to have to let it dry, but so messier than I had foreseen. Kind of hoping it hadn't gotten into the inside like this, but here we are. Here we are. So the resin is not something you want on your skin. The chemicals are pretty nasty, so you definitely want to wear gloves when you're in risk of touching it. Just for safety's sake. Better to have them and not need them than need them not have them. Pretty messy mistake. And it's not a fault of the resin printer. It was entirely user error. I should have checked to see if it was screwed down all the way. So that's on me. Not to blame anybody else. Alright. So I'm going to let that dry. The IPA will evaporate. This is clean. So a little bit messier process than I had hoped. That's okay. Down, hopefully getting any of the resin that's still on there in its liquid form. Once it's dried, you can touch it, of course, but generally you don't want to hit your paws on wet resin. Goobertown Hobbies did a good explanation video talking about the chemical properties, because I know he's a chemist, but he goes into some detail and kind of gives a good explanation for why you generally don't want to touch wet resin, if at all possible. It's probably not going to be fatal, and you work with it, you're going to touch it here and there, but it's not something you want to consistently get on your skin. Alright. So by the time I get these screws out, the rest of the tank will have evaporated its IPA. So hopefully I won't have to stop the stream and wait. And again, when you're removing screws, you don't have to worry too much about the order in which you do it, because you're not saving the screen anyway. It's all busted up. It's got a hole in the middle. It's not going to be reused. Only when they're going in do you need to kind of hop back and forth and keep a consistent tension, because these screws are really what keeps the tension on the plastic. So not exactly what I was expecting to do today. Thought I was going to work on pulling some video for the next how-to, working on some scatter terrain, but I'll have to do that later today. Once we get the dad stuff out of the way, it is freezing outside, so any plans to go outside were put on hold. It's going to be very cold here this next week, so there will be no outdoor excursions going on. I'm not a stranger to the cold, but my two sons have not had to experience sub-zero temperatures before, or near sub-zero temperatures. They will see just how cold that can be. The older one has all that bravado. He's like, I'm going to run outside in just a t-shirt and shorts and see how it feels. I'm like, all right, you do that. Don't stay out there for very long. You're going to be very, very cold. Sometimes you just have to do things to learn. I find it. Which is the coldest I have ever been. When the year I lived out in Montana, my brother, who was finishing his last year at the university while I was in my second year, he decided that we were going to go snow camping. And so we got our sub-zero sleeping bags and packed up his Jeep and drove out into the snow up in the mountains. And this was in January, and definitely one of the most reckless things I've ever done. Set up the tent and did quote unquote snow camping, and it was very cold. Probably pretty stupid in retrospect. We made it, obviously, survived. And learned not to do that anymore. Alright, so again, there's more wet resin in here, so now we're going to wash that off. Again, entirely my fault for this to happen. I need to throw this away. Need to clean it since it's getting tossed anyway. But I can't put the new one in with wet resin on it. Yucky stuff. Yucky. Actually, I think most of that was the paint that was on my fingers. Alright, that's going to evaporate. Just try to chip that off even. Alright. Take the other one. So, not normally this messy a process, but here we are. We do what we need to do. good. Alright. So with that, so a little bit of hardened resin on here. I don't like it. I don't like it. No, sir, I don't like it. Yep, good thing I'm wearing glasses. Always wear your safety goggles. That was one of the worst parts of having to teach an intro to engineering class the couple of years I did it. Like, trying to convince kids to wear safety glasses. Like, you're not going to like it if a little shard of something goes flying in your eye. You know, they're invincible. I will be right back. Sorry about that. All right. I've got some on the inside here too. Let's see if I can scrape it. Resin dust. Nice. Well, at least gets the edge off of it. That's good. We'll vacuum later. Alright. So we've got that cleaned up. There's no more liquid or resin floating around. Make sure we're got the plates in the right direction. Yes. Flat ends. Yep. All right. So we can get the new FEP sheet ready for this. Get it on there and hopefully be good to go. And it's good to have a few replacements handy. This package I think came with 5, but you're gonna have to change a FEP eventually. Like just from use, even without the user error. Let's see how many are in here. 5. So I've used, this will be the 3rd one I've used. Second one I've used. I hear you, cat. I must be streaming, so it's time to interrupt. So I'm going to take off the protective coating. And these are lots of static electricity going on. place it between the two. And now do our best to not jam anything into them. Now it's fine that it's bigger because you're going to end up trimming it off anyway. The idea is to sandwich it between the two. Now, some of the instructions I saw just had you push the screws through, but these screws aren't, they don't have sharp tips, and you could end up causing more damage than you're preventing. So I actually will be proactive and punch a little hole for the screw to go through with the X-Acto knife before it goes in. So that actually just helps it go in and saves you the trouble of having to push too hard and being paranoid about pushing too hard. So it'll go through and secure. You don't want to push too hard, but enough so it's not going anywhere. And then from now on, you're going to alternate sides. So while removing screws, it didn't really matter. Oh dear, did I just poke a hole through that again? It would be really funny if I did. Well, shit. So well, I think I just ruined that one by dropping the X-Acto on it. So I'm going to take it out and not even waste my time. I'll just use another sheet. So that's frustrating, but I don't want to put in a bunch of screws and put it back in the printer just to find out that that new hole that I just added is a problem. So there's probably a good example why you shouldn't do this on stream and should focus on doing it and not talking while you're working. So you make little mistakes like that that cost you $4. $4 mistake. Working hard. Yeah. Well, doesn't feel as rewarding when you're working to fix an earlier mistake. A lot less rewarding. How's it going, Maker? I'm going to not poke a hole through the screen, but I'm going to get that little piece of resin out. Alright. So we're going to line it up so it's generally kind of in the middle. And this time I'm going to poke a hole without poking a hole in the actual screen part. And put in our first screw. It gets a lot less stressful as the screws go in because nothing's moving around after you've got good 4 of them in, 3 of them in. Come on. Sometimes it doesn't want to go through the plastic. But I'll get through it. Alright, this time I will not drop the X-Acto knife on the plastic. But again, going to the opposite side and working my way up. Back and forth here and there to get the screws in. Then as you go, it'll tense up the plastic. And you'll have yourself the FEP all looking good. this is really technically challenging. Removing screws, putting down plastic, replacing screws. So it was the thing that worried me the most before I pulled the trigger on the printer. But now that I've done it a couple of times, I'm not as intimidated. Of course, when I'm not accidentally putting holes in the FEP with the X-Acto knife. Don't do that. Alright. So I got 4 in here. It's gonna get tighter as you go, as you put more screws in. So don't have to worry about tension or anything like that. It kind of just does it. What's that cat doing out there? This cat likes to get attention by chewing on things he shouldn't chew on. So you hear the crinkle of plastic. He likes plastic bags, Ziploc bags, anything that's left out that's plastic. He'll chew on and even swallow, because that's for even more attention he'll get when he eventually throws it up. Mostly he's begging for food, even though he gets fed on a regular basis. It's to pretend like he's starving. Working our way around, poking holes and replacing screws. The final, it'll still even look a little loose when all the screws are in, but when you place it inside of the tray will actually add the last bit of tension that will pull it tight, and it'll be, when you tap your fingers on it, it'll sound like a drum. You'll know it's good. Car salesman slapping the top of it. That's the sound of a good FEP. Fits so many models in here. Oh, I think he's got a toy mouse. That's what he's pushing around. Hear it. A little bell on it. Yeah, so I wanted to work on these craters today. So I've got them washed and ready for detail work, but it's gonna have to wait. That's actually gonna be tomorrow's video. How to paint craters with freshly created craters with the fiery bit still in the middle. Molten. Freshly carbonized heretic. Slowly going around, and you don't have to worry about not knowing which hole is which, because again, the larger screw holes are obvious. Don't have to be concerned about that. Pretty much idiot proof, which is good, because sometimes I feel like that. So much with 3D printing is really just learning the process. And it's like anything else, when you know the process and practice it a little bit, it doesn't become that big of a deal. And there shouldn't be a barrier to entry. So once all these screws are in, we'll place it into the larger tank and then trim off the excess plastic around the edge. But you don't want to do it before that, because you don't want to trim off too much. So then you risk having leaks. You don't want leaks. As I can personally attest to, it is harsh. It's a harsh hour-long lesson to fix. Being messaged by somebody. Alright. Just keep going. Keep plugging away at it here. Got about 8 screws, 9 screws to go. Time flies when you're fixing a mistake. I'm not sure that's how that adage goes. Alright, let's do this one up here. Oh, time flies when you're having fun. Oh, okay. Youngest got one of those fossil dig kits for Christmas, so he's running around the house with a mock dinosaur tooth. Look, Dad, I lost my tooth. Big old T-Rex tooth. Fun. Having fun. The older one is all too cool for those kinds of things now. He wants to just play games on Steam and VR. Which I guess is understandable. Having boys 5 years apart, it's been interesting. But the older one has been a pretty good sport about entertaining his brother and playing with his brother. He's been pretty good. Not all of us had really good experiences with older siblings, and so I think maybe the age difference helped reduce the sibling rivalry a little bit. My sister and I are a little bit more than a year apart, and spent most of our childhood at each other's throats. Thankfully that went away, but at the time it was annoying. Alright, so I don't think I'm missing any. I think this was the extra one that was in the bag. So now that we've got that, it'll be the last thing we do is clean the screen. But now we have our tray, and we're going to make sure we're and the right one up. Right way up. So it's just going to sit on top there, and then as you push down with the screws, it's going to add the tension around the edge. But before we do that, I want to take some of the edge off this dried resin so that it's not going to cut the FEP. Last thing I need is a hole in the resin. In the FEP again. Replace the FEP and then poke a hole in the FEP by replacing the FEP. Bits of resin everywhere now. But at least it's not sharp. It really should be clean. You don't want sharp bits of resin pressing on the FEP, because then you'll just have a hole in your FEP, and you'll have undone your entire process. I'm gonna have to hit this with IPA again to get these little pieces off. How's it going, Seamus? Action packed over here. Action packed. Just vacuum the floor too. That's alright, I'll do it again later. Oh, this is insanely useful. Yeah, I got it when it was 3D printing with PLA plastic, and it just has 1001 useful bits to it. It's great for getting mold lines. So, just have it and use it, and just one of those go-to tools. Alright. Make sure there are no sharp bits that will poke into the plastic. That would be bad. So there's definitely some residue of resin in there. Get a new tank here in the future if that resin keeps building up in there. But you don't want little bits of resin in there. That's a recipe for messed up prints and frustration. Alright, now we're clean. We have our new FEP sheet. It's going to sit down on top, and these are where we're going to use the next set of screws. Not the four corners, those are our last four, but all of the others. And this one's a little tricky because you have to push pretty hard to get it down in there and get the screws to catch. Actually, I think this might be backwards. Yep, it's backwards. I need to flip it around. So we'll screws here. I think in order to get the screws to catch, you have to push down a little bit. So this is kind of the trickiest part of the process, because you don't want to screw it all the way in, because then it's hard to get all the other screws in. But after the first few, it's not so bad. But you don't want to tighten them all the way down, because yeah, it'll make the rest of the process more difficult. But again, alternating sides. That way, once you get the first few in, oops, not going to need that one anymore. Stop putting it next to where the one I do need. But this is where you put the last bit of tension on the FEP. And you'll get that kind of drum sound when you tap your fingers on it. You don't have to worry about little dust getting on there, because the very last thing I'll do is wash the screen with IPA and a screen wipe, and it will be nice and clean. Come on, catch screw. Come on. Let's try this one. I can get the one next to that one in, and the other one won't be so bad. Across to this side. The idea is to keep the equal tension. Prototyping or drilling a salt car today. Cool. Tag me so I know I can see how it turns out. To see it when you're done. And once you have the first 5 or 6 screws in there, the rest are easy. It's just the first couple that can be annoying. Definitely get a good tension. And that just happens by function of the resin tank's design, putting equal, hopefully, ideally equal pressure on it. You want it tight, but you don't want it so tight that it rips. But thankfully, the tank really does all the work to make sure that's the case. Last two. We'll do the four corners, and we'll be done. I can print the thing I wanted to print last night before I made this silly mistake. Don't need your spam. Don't need it, don't want it. Alright, the very last thing I want to do is go back around and make sure each one's nice and snug. We're not going for over tightening, but we do want them to be tight. So especially the first few, I didn't go super tight. It was just enough to get them in. So for each one, give it that extra little turn. You can kind of tell just by looking which ones are a little loose. We're gonna need new screws eventually. Like any good Allen wrench screw, they eventually do wear out on you. You get a certain number of uses before they start to go out on you. We're getting pretty close here. We are good. All right, I think we're good. Let's see, that one's a little high. Last step will be to cut the plastic around the edge, and then we'll be done. And then we can print and cross our fingers. Alright, so very last step. We're going to trim around the sides with the X-Acto knife in a careful way so as to not slip and stab the middle, which would undo all of your work. So I'm going to be careful and not do that. As that would just be silly. Doing this on stream is like an added layer of stress. I don't know what I was thinking. This is what? Probably not the best idea ever. So I already screwed up once. Earlier and had to start over. And wasted a FEP sheet. It's the thing that happened. Alright, we're going to put that over there so I can't cause any more damage with it. We're going to put our last 4 screws in, the 4 corner screws, which are awesome because they actually lift the plate up. I'm not sure if you're ever forgot to poke holes in it. I'm actually going to need the X-Acto knife one more time. When you need to take the reservoir out and set it down, it doesn't sit on the FEP. It sits on the 4 corner screws, which is awesome. Then you don't have to worry about accidentally stabbing your FEP or smudging it with something. So it's a nifty little design that they have. This has taken me almost an hour because I made one mistake and it added about 10 minutes. So first time I did it only took about 25 minutes, I think. So either I think it's because of all the cleanup I had to do. Before I didn't have resin on the inside, so that's what increased the time. Oh well. What are you gonna do? You can't. No use getting angry about it. Doesn't accomplish anything. All right. We are good to go. I'm gonna do a last minute wash with a IPA. Use some Kim Tech wipes. Those of you with eyeglasses are probably fond of the Kim Tech wipes. They are quite useful for washing off glasses and apparently FEP screens. That will evaporate here momentarily. It doesn't take very long for IPA to evaporate. So. Washing it out, and we'll have ourselves a replaced FEP screen. And I would take the camera over, but it's kind of stationary. So we'll sit down back on top of the print bed, and this time I will remember to screw it down. Haha. And we'll have ourselves some 3D printed items. So cool beans. I'm going to go and get this set up, and I will say goodbye. If you're here, Maker. If you're here, Seamus. Take care. Have a good day. I will talk to you later. Thanks.